Hello, this is Mrs. Morris. I'm going to go through the task Journey to a Poem, which I set last week to the whole of Year 7. If you did it, have your answers in front of you so that you can check your answers against the answers I'm going to give. If you didn't do it, please stay with us because I'm going to go through the questions before I give the answers. So just think about how you would answer the questions, even if you didn't do the work. Okay, so I'd like you to stay with me on this particular journey. Right, are we ready? Okay, let's go. Now, one of the things I asked you to do was to find out some facts about Guyana, and because that's where Grace Nichols comes from, and that's the place that she's writing about. And you can see the arrow pointing there to Guyana. Now, Guyana is actually in South America. It's not an island, but it's very much part of the Caribbean culture. So if you look, you can see the Caribbean Sea just above there. And although it's on the mainland, it's obviously on the coast, and it's got a very Caribbean culture. So it's got, the food and the music and everything that you would think of and associate with places like, for example, Jamaica. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by reading the text aloud, particularly for those people who might not have read this before. If you already have read it and you don't want to listen to me, you are welcome to skip forward a little bit towards the answers. I don't mind at all, and that is obviously one of the advantages of home learning, because you can't do that in the classroom. For the rest of us, I am going to read the text aloud. So off we go. Grace Nichols' Journey to a Poem. Whenever I remember the country village along the Guyana coast where I spent my small girl days, I can't help seeing water, water everywhere. Brown silky water when it rained heavily. Fish swimming into people's yards and children catching them in old baskets. One of the best memories I have of myself is standing up to my calves in the sunlit water, watching the shapes of fish go by, and every now and then cupping my own hands underneath and feeling the slippery fish slip through my fingers. My favourite fish was the sunfish. It was a little longer than some of the other fishes, with a fine grey scale on top and a reddish-orange glow of a belly below. But the nice thing about Hydam, that was the name of the village, was that the water in the yards and pastures never stayed on the land for too long, because there were these two cokers with big wheels on either side of the village bridge. Workmen would go and turn the wheels, which always made me think of windmills, until bit by bit the water drained away into a canal at the back of the village. Then the hot sun would soon make everything dry, and children could run around again, playing their cricket and rounders and hopscotch. Another Hydam thing I remember is sneaking down to the seashore with my sisters and brother to catch crab in the early mornings, just before the last bit of darkness disappeared from the skies. But you must be wondering what all this has to do with poetry. Well, my childhood life in that country village plays a big part in my poetry, because a lot of my poems are about creatures and back-home happenings. Just as how your own imagination might be stirred by thoughts of winter, for example, of crunching through thick powdery snow, tobogganing, making a snowman, maybe curling up in front of fires with a hot drink. So my own imagination is stirred by my childhood. I was awakened by tropical things. I'm now going to read the poem, I'm a Parrot by Grace Nichols. I'm a parrot, I live in a cage, I'm nearly always in a vex-up rage. I used to fly all light and free in the luscious green forest canopy. I am a parrot, I live in a cage, I'm nearly always in a vex-up rage. I miss the wind against my wing, I miss the nut and the fruit picking. I'm a parrot, I live in a cage, I'm nearly always in a vex-up rage. I squawk, I talk, I curse, I swear, I repeat the things I shouldn't hear. So don't come near me or put out your hand, because I'll pick you if I can. Pick you if I can. I want to be free. Can't you understand? I then asked you to think about a few questions, but not to write them down. So I'm going to go through those. The first thing in who or what seems to be speaking in the poem, and I think most of us probably work out fairly quickly that it's a parrot based on the first line and also the title of the poem. So it's written in the first person. It's got the I there. It tells us it's a first person poem, and so the poem's written by or being spoken by the parrot. What kind of a mood is the parrot in and why? Pretty obvious. You've got repetition, almost like a chorus of I'm a parrot, I live in a cage, I'm nearly always in a vexed up rage. So that's repeated 3 times. So being vexed up, being vexed means to be angry. Rage obviously means angry. Why? Well, that's in the same stanza as I live in a cage. So he doesn't say I live in a cage and therefore I'm angry, but by those being very close together, in those lines being very close together in the same verse, in the same stanza, we can tell the anger is being caused by him being in the cage. The next point I asked you to think about was what picture are we given of his life before he was caged? Well, they've got some gorgeous language. Grace Nichols has put some lovely language in. So he says, I used to fly all light and free. And then we've got the words luscious green forest canopy. Sounds beautiful and obviously very, very, very different. You've got the words free and it's being contrasted. For those of you who are happy with the word juxtaposition, she's juxtaposing the idea of freedom flying in the green forest with the cage, but they're obviously the opposites. They're being contrasted. And the other thing we're given is that he misses the wind against his wings. Again, the idea of flying, because obviously he can't fly in the cage. And then he misses the food that he used to be able to choose, because now obviously he's been given food, but he hasn't got any choice. How do we know this is a poem? We can tell actually by a number of features. The most obvious one is to do with how it's set out on the page. So you've got these very short lines, but obviously the use of repetition as well, and that tells us it's a poem rather than a piece of text. There is a link there. If you can't be bothered to copy it down, if you just go into your favourite search engine and type in I Am a Parrot by Grace Nichols, that one will actually come up, and it is worth listening to Grace Nichols read her own poem, so I suggest you do that. On the next few slides, I'm going to show you the question and then the answer. So if you see a slide with a red background, that is going to be the question. And if you look at the slides with the green background, that's going to be the answers. If you've already done this work, it really doesn't matter. You're just going to follow through. But if you haven't already done this work and you think you'd like to do it now, when you get to a red slide, you might just want to pause the presentation for a couple of minutes while you think about the answers. It really doesn't matter whether you write them down or not. Sometimes it helps you to think if you write things down, but if you don't want to do that, I just want you to think of the answers in your head before you then move on to the green slide, which will give you the answer. Okay, right. So the first question is, when the writer thinks of her childhood, she thinks of water. She says, I can't help seeing water, water everywhere. Give 2 reasons why you think she says this, and find a quotation from the text to support each reason. Okay, so you're going to press the pause button if you haven't got your answer ready, and then move on to the next slide. As often is the case in English, there are more than 2 possible answers. So I've just given you 2 here, but you might have some different answers. So what's important is you give a reason and then you give a quotation to support that reason. So one of the reasons she says it is because it rained heavily in Guyana, and the quotation I've given is brown silky water when it rained heavily. And then the second reason why she talks about the water, it's the back gardens became flooded And the quotation which supports this is fish swimming into people's yards. You might also mention the thing about going off to collect crabs in the very early morning, because that would be obviously another thing about water. So question number 2. In paragraph 2, the writer mentions 2 cokers, but she does not explain exactly what these are. What do you think the people of Highdown use the cokers for? Use clues from the rest of the paragraphs to help you. So you need to explain what they are, what they're used for, and how do you know. So you're trying to find a quotation that will support. So if you might just want to pause for a minute while you answer those questions.